I'm data-driven. We're a data-driven organization. We're looking for people who are data-driven. We're going to transform our business by becoming data-driven. Oh my God, if I hear this phrase one more time, I think I'm going to lose it in a way that is completely immeasurable. It's not because I dislike data, but geez, it is so overused and misused that I feel like we need a deep dive into the pros and cons of it, what it's good for, and how it can lead us into traps as leaders and employees, how we transform data into wisdom, and what the role of intuition is in all of this. Whether you're a data lover or hater, you're going to find this video useful. Stay tuned for some data about data. For some people, data is a stick used to figuratively beat people over the head with. Some treat it as if it's an all-knowing oracle that can predict the future. Others use it to reinforce a belief they already hold, usually while ignoring data that might disprove that belief. Others wear data like a fine outfit to make themselves look better to their bosses, or maybe at parties. Data is misunderstood, misused, overtrusted, sometimes gamed, and rarely represents everything you need to know to rely on it as your sole decision mechanism. Have you also noticed that there's an air of condescension when people brag about being driven by data? It's as if the rest of us just walk around ignoring it all day. Yeah, Sean, you go ahead and keep making decisions in the dark over there. I'm going to light up my path with data. On the flip side, I don't think it's healthy to make decisions without data either. I'm sure we've all seen a friend or coworker make a really dumb decision because they have a gut feeling or intuition. Probably one of the best recent examples of ignoring data and going with intuition was Stockton Rush and the Titan submarine. Rush was told that using carbon fiber was a bad idea for a vessel under such immense pressure, and there was a lot of data to show it. Rush was convinced that his audio detection system would reveal hull integrity issues, but deep sea experts were telling him that it would be too late to act by the time it sounded the alarm. Tragically, this is exactly what happened. The carbon fiber began to fail near the bottom, and those warnings didn't sound in time for him to resurface, costing him the lives of everyone on board, including himself. Intuition is a very powerful thing that we're going to try to unravel in a bit, but relying on it alone can be just as bad as relying on data alone. As Buddhists say, the middle is the way. We can't talk about data without first putting it in context to all the ways that it evolves into other things. In its most basic form, data is an unstructured collection of factual bits, measurements of a certain thing at a given moment in time. The number 110 is data, but it's lacking any context. But if I tell you that 110 is my heart rate when someone tells me they're data-driven, we now have some context. As data begins to gain structure and context, it becomes information. Once we apply critical thinking and analysis, information becomes knowledge. Turning data into knowledge requires us to determine relevance, accuracy, and reliability. Knowledge is not just a bunch of facts. If what you have is a bunch of facts, you have information. Knowledge is practical and actionable. When we apply knowledge to real-life situations, we learn to discard what didn't work for us and reinforce what did. This is when knowledge becomes experience. Trying things is how we get experience from knowledge. Knowledge is watching a YouTube video about building a fence. Experience is, building a fence. Once we have knowledge and experience, we sometimes have an insight. Something will just hit us. The stars will align, and suddenly we'll see the connection between two things that didn't seem connected at first. Or we seem to spontaneously create something new using pieces of our knowledge. We may have a gut feeling at this point, an intuition. While insights spring from our depth of knowledge and experience, intuitions are much faster and instinctual. Intuitions do not involve reasoning. Somehow, we just know something. That doesn't mean we're right, by the way. It just means we think we are now in possession of something we think is true that we didn't have before. The dangerous thing that our minds can do at this moment is to let our egos take charge. When we want to be right, We muster our brains to the task of cherry picking the data and the information that makes us feel more right. This is why the smarter you are, the better you are at bullshitting yourself. Essentially, you're bringing a smart person to your side of the debate table, even if you're both wrong. Stockton Rush was convinced that the regulatory agencies that certified deep water craft were there to stifle innovation and stop people like him from achieving greatness. That conspiratorial thinking led him to disregard any data from the very people who were trying to save him. Something similar happened with COVID vaccines. The learning we can get from these examples is that our intuition can really be the complementary friend of our data, but only if our ego isn't involved. Once we've created an us and a them, or a need to be right over a need to get it right, we're in the danger zone and should probably no longer trust our intuition and instead lean towards the data. Okay, back to the evolution of data. Once we have knowledge and had an insight or form an intuition, we form a strategy to bring it all to action. It may not be the correct strategy, but it is often well thought out to the best of our ability at the time. And by the way, the less experience we have, the poorer these strategies are, because we simply don't know many of the ways that don't work. And we usually don't know what we don't know, which is just wonderful. That's called the Dunning-Kruger effect, and we'll cover that in a future video. So, finally, we arrive at wisdom. We've created lots of strategies, tried and failed many times. If we're smart, we're analyzing what didn't work each time we fail and what we could do better. That lends itself to much clearer and faster strategies in the future. In fact, wisdom is a positive feedback loop. The more wisdom we have, the faster we can go from data to wisdom in the future. We use our wisdom to sift through information and make better strategies to act on better intuitions. Or we just blame other people for every damn thing that goes wrong in our lives and deprive ourselves of the chance to gain true wisdom. As a side note, this is why it's a very bad habit for companies to rid themselves of employees just because they're older. Let's not feign surprise and clutch pearls. We all know it's happening. It's harder for older people to find work, and that's just silly. These are people walking around with a lot of hard-earned wisdom. Okay, so hopefully what you got from all that is when someone says they're data-driven, it should at least throw up a red flag. Because when I hear that, I'm thinking that the people who said it believe their data is more real than reality, and that they're foolishly confident that they're measuring what matters when the odds are that what matters either isn't measurable or will only become clear in hindsight. The more sentences that begin with the phrase, "the data says," the more you should be seeing red flags, because data is just data. What it says requires study, experience, and expertise. And these things introduced subjectivity. The data is objective. What the data says is subjective. Now that you have the fundamentals about data and how it transforms to wisdom, let's go through 10 reasons why being purely data-driven is a bad idea. Number 1, quality and accuracy. Data can be biased, gamed, inaccurate, or incomplete. This is especially true if a leader has attached sticks or carrots to a target on that data. Human beings will absolutely game data if they believe they will be punished for missing a target or rewarded for hitting it. In this scenario, if the data can be gamed, it will be gamed. This is known as Goodhart's law. When a target is placed on a measurement, it ceases to be a useful measure. I'll make another video on Goodhart's law, and I'll put a link to it in the description when it's done. 2, tunnel vision. We love quantifiable things, but over-relying on them makes us neglect or even unfairly dismiss human intuition and wisdom, which are sometimes hard to readily back up with data. Just be on the lookout for the ego. 3, data overload. Data is fucking everywhere, loads of it. It's sometimes nearly impossible to sift through it all looking for the data that is actually helpful. In fact, some organizations and leaders spend more time gathering and sifting through data to avoid a bad outcome than it would take to just run a short experiment and learn from the outcome. 4, cost. Yeah, wow, this one's tragic. Most data-driven folks will tell you they pursue data to save or make more money, but they often jump over dollars to pick up dimes. I've worked for companies that take nearly the first quarter of every year to make an annual plan. That's hundreds of well-paid employees doing nothing but gathering data for months to make a plan for a year that's already 25% over with and rarely pans out in Q4 the way it was predicted in Q1. Make it make sense. 5. Analysis paralysis. Sometimes we get so much data to analyze that we take longer to make decisions than just, going for it. Sure, it's possible that your data-driven decision will result in a better outcome, but it's a near certainty that your competition will still kick your ass because the fast eat the slow for breakfast. And those companies that learn to fail fast innovate faster than those who try to avoid failure by studying mountains of data. 6. Short-term bias. Data-driven decision-making can encourage short-term perspectives. Data is no fortune teller in a volatile world. No one had COVID on their 5-year roadmap in 2018. Because the value and accuracy of data rapidly diminishes the further into the future we want to use it, the actions we can take with data are also biased towards short-term outcomes. 7. False comparisons. Specifically, what we measure and how we measure it can subtly evolve over time. This means that historical data can look a lot like the current data on the surface, but it actually has different context. So essentially, it's the same type of data, but different information. Comparing historical data to current data can sometimes be like comparing cabbage to iceberg lettuce. Come on, am I the only one that gets confused about this in the produce aisle? Moving on. 8. Inflexibility. Organizations that proclaim they are data-driven tend to follow the data even when reality is pounding on the door, screaming about something that the data isn't showing. 9. Ignoring important stuff that can't be measured. Focusing on data can lead us to believe we're f***ing Neo from the Matrix and everything we're looking at is ones and zeros. But human beings are complex, so that means it's very difficult to quantify employee morale or customer satisfaction. We can become so enamored with our numbers, we lose track of what really matters. And 10, the need for data causes trust issues. If every time you bring an obvious problem to your boss, they tell you to go prove it with numbers, what they're really telling you is they just don't trust you. Sure, it makes sense to validate some of your hypotheses when the stakes are high, but when everything has to be backed up with numbers, people waste a lot of time proving stuff that doesn't need to be proven. I don't need the numbers to tell you that I can make it to the grocery store faster on a bike than I can walking. But some companies make employees prove things as obvious as that. It's not just a waste of time, it drives disconnection between employees and their leaders. So, there you have it. A primer on data and the 10 reasons it's a dumb idea to solely rely on it to make decisions. Remember that data isn't information, information isn't knowledge, and knowledge isn't wisdom. The best practice is to learn how to use data and intuition to check each other, and to have the wisdom to know when compiling and sifting through data is less valuable or more expensive than running short experiments and learning from them. If you enjoyed this video, forward it to your favorite data freak from an anonymous email account, and don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel because there's a lot more content on the way. Thanks for watching.